Real Clear Politics reports today that Romney is among those who have most vigorously sought the endorsement of Sarah Palin, according to her aides. But Palin is just not that into Romney. Advisors suggest that Newt Gingrich appears to be best positioned to secure her support. They speak very favorably of Newt and what they see as his credentials as compared to Perry and Romney. One member of Palin's inner circle said of the former Alaska governor and her husband Todd, who has long served as her unofficial chief advisor. Joining me now are Christina Bellantoni, the Associate Politics Editor for Roll Call, and Melissa Harris-Perry, MSNBC contributor, Professor of Political Science at Tulane University. Melissa, this secret meeting, which is no longer secret, and was really kind of obvious, that Christian conservatives really want to find an anybody but Romney candidate, aren't they just kind of getting in a room and doing together in a relatively small group what all the rest of the larger Republican electorate has been trying to do?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's certainly what it feels like watching this GOP primary season thus far, is that there's been a pretty solid Romney vote, those supporters, and then there is the very powerful and, in fact, vast majority of GOP voters at this point who, in expressing their preferences in polls, they haven't actually voted or caucused yet, but they're basically saying not Romney, and they've been moving around trying to figure out who is the right not Romney candidate. Is it Bachmann? Is it Perry? Now is it Gingrich? And so I think we really have to ask sort of how powerful is that? Is that powerful enough to sustain a kind of not Romneyism all the way through, so that if he became the nominee, would they simply stay home in the general election? And that, I think, is obviously the fear of those who really would like to defeat President Obama in the fall.
Let's listen again to the highlight of last night's debate when Newt Gingrich took a position on immigration that might make it difficult for some of those conservatives to pick him out of that group. Let's listen to what he had to say.
I don't see how the party that says it's the party of the family is going to adopt an immigration policy which destroys families that have been here a quarter century, and I'm prepared to take the heat for saying, let's be humane in enforcing the law without giving them citizenship, but by finding a way to create legality so that they are not separated from their families. Governor, I do not believe that the people of the United States are going to take people who've been here a quarter century, who have children and grandchildren, who are members of the community, who may have done something 25 years ago, separate them from their families, and expel them.
Christina, does that move Gingrich away from that group that was meeting secretly on Monday trying to pick an alternative to Romney, or did he couch his position in the right language for them, family? And another version of that, he talked about if they belong to their local church, tied them into community that way. Where does that leave him with this kind of conservative group that's looking for the alternative to Romney?
I don't think that necessarily helps warm him up, but what this group is really going to need to decide ultimately is, do they want the true social conservative? That's going to be Rick Santorum or Michelle Bachmann, or do they want someone that looks to be able to withstand the entire primary process and then go on to fight against Barack Obama? And so that's really the core decision they're going to have to make. The values aren't really all that different. I mean, this was a pretty remarkable moment last night with Gingrich, being honest about this issue that, by the way, Rick Perry was booed for a very similar position a few debates back. So I think that they need to really see who's the most electable. And Santorum and Bachmann line up on all of their ideals, and they both have been courting faith leaders in Iowa for many months. That was one of Bachmann's first moves when she launched her campaign. But Gingrich is probably a little more likable to win.
Now, this is, of course, difficult for Mitt Romney to jump on, since he's been everywhere on every issue himself over the years. Gingrich, I think, played it well with Romney today. Romney tried to make something of this, and Gingrich said, he tweeted, here's a trip down memory lane. So what's your position on citizenship for illegals again? Because Newt says, I oppose it. And then Newt linked to this video of Mitt Romney.
My own view is, consistent with what you saw in the Lowell Sun, that those people who have come here illegally and are in this country, the 12 million or so that are here illegally, should be able to sign up for permanent residency or citizenship.
Yeah.
Melissa, this is an impossible campaign for Romney, I think. Whenever he wants to take a shot at any Republican for anything, there's bound to be a clip of him having adopted that position at some point in the past.
It's true. Like, Romney 2011 is so mad at Romney 2009, Romney 2005. You know, he's just like, his current self is mad at all of his former selves. But look, one of the things that Gingrich did last night in that position he took, in addition to framing it as family, and he did make the church position, the other thing he did is the one thing that Republican voters have responded to extremely well, even from the first administration of George W. Bush, and that is he framed his dissent as courage. He said, look, I know that you all are going to be unhappy with this position, but I'm going to be courageous enough to take it. And the fact is that that notion of staying the course, having the strong backbone, being willing to say things even when they are difficult, I mean, that's what got Sarah Palin an awful lot of applause lines during her vice presidential run. It was a big part of George W. Bush's re-election campaign. And I think even more than the family piece or the church piece, it was this idea that by taking an unpopular stance, I'm doing something courageous. And that is something that Romney hasn't been able to figure out how to do yet.
Christina, there's a new Pew poll out that's polling the question of how does Romney's Mormon religion affect his candidacy with Republicans and then the general election. Shows not much real likely effect in a general election if he can get to that nomination, but it shows there is considerable resistance among evangelical Christians to voting for a Mormon in the Republican primary. Does the Romney campaign have any actual strategy to deal with that, or just simply stay away from questions of religion?
Yeah, well, welcome to December 2007. This is really what happened when it came to Iowa and Romney putting so much of his campaign eggs in that basket, and Mike Huckabee really courting that evangelical vote by not really going after Romney's faith, but that's sort of the underlying question there that whole time, and that's one reason why he didn't win in Iowa. And I think that the campaign, they're going about the strategy of, he'll answer any question. He recently was asked about it, and he made sure to point out the full name of my church is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they're trying to educate people a little bit more about Mormonism, but I think that it is a big issue, and the numbers are, I believe, are a little misleading when it comes to the general election because it's such a hypothetical, and I think some of the poll numbers that I've looked at show that so many people don't necessarily understand some of the underlying history and basis of Mormonism, and so whoever gets to that education campaign best for the American people is going to be able to really define what Romney is and what he believes in.
And Melissa, in the primary, one of the big glaring numbers that's a problem for him is that 53% of white evangelicals say that Mormons are not Christian, no matter what the formal title of their religion actually is. Is there a way for Romney to somehow get past that?
Well, look, this is the fun that I just had. I just sat in for Rachel on her show in the last segment, and I sort of came out in terms of my maternal line being Mormons, although I am not myself a Mormon. I come from a very, very long line of Mormons. And what's been interesting for me watching Romney try to address this question is, unlike Kennedy, who addressed the Catholicism question by going to core American values of freedom of religion, freedom of expression, and the extent to which we are all the same even when we believe different things, instead, because they can't do that, because they of course don't want to allow, for example, Islam to have that sort of free religious possibility within the states. So instead what they do is they try to make a theological argument about Mormonism, and that is a much more difficult place to be. I actually think that what Romney ought to do is go to core American values about the freedom of religion, the freedom of expression, rather than trying to make a claim about his religion's specific theological claims.
Christina Bellantoni and Melissa Harris Perry, thank you both very much for joining me tonight.
Thanks.
Thanks. Happy Thanksgiving.